"Don't waste your time trying to talk to him," said Margaret Whitmore, adjusting his designer glasses as he watched Isabella carefully clean the floor of the room. Thomas was born deaf. The best experts in the country have confirmed this dozens of times. The Whitmore mansion in Beverly Hills breathed opulence, Italian marble, Austrian crystal chandeliers, and works of art that cost more than most people earn in a lifetime. Isabella Flores, 34, had started working there just 3 weeks after emigrating the Philippines in search of a better life for her own daughter in her home country. Margaret kept talking while moving on his cell phone, completely ignoring the 8-year-old boy sitting on the nearby couch. The doctor said the hearing nerve did not develop properly. Poor Richard spent a fortune on experts, hearing aids, therapies. Nothing works, Isabella observed discreetly as Thomas played with her toys in silence. There was something in those brown eyes that intrigued her, a living intelligence that seemed to contradict the diagnosis that everyone accepted without question. As a mother, she recognized that attentive look that captured every detail around. "Isabella," Margaret clapped her hands to get attention. "Are you listening to me? You don't have to be delicate with him. Don't hear it." It was then that something almost imperceptible happened. When Margaret clapped, Thomas stopped playing for a second fraction. His shoulders tensed slightly before he quickly moved the toys, keeping the same empty expression as always. Isabella pretended not noticing, but her heart shot. In the Philippines, it was careful of several children with hearing impairs and knew how to recognize the natural reactions of someone truly deaf. That was not one. "Mr. Whitmore will come home at 6, Margaret continued, keeping the Louis Vuitton bag. "Make sure Thomas is in his room. Richard doesn't like complications after a difficult day in business." While Margaret went out by clicking the jumps through the hallway, Isabella remained in the room tidying up the pillows. Thomas kept playing, but she realized how he followed the sound of the stepmother's steps moving away, only with subtle eyes of the eyes. Isabella approached silently and, pretending to stumble, knocked a decorative vase on the marble floor. The noise echoed through the room like thunder. Thomas was visibly startled, turning his head toward the sound before quickly resuming the previous posture, as if nothing had happened. During the following days, Isabella began to do discreet small tests. He hummed softly as he cleaned and noticed as Thomas slightly leaned his head, as if capturing the melody. When it dropped objects accidentally, I saw the immediate reaction to the boy's muscles, followed by the rapid composure. There were signs everywhere for those who knew where to look. Thomas reacted to specific sounds. The noise of the refrigerator opening meant snack. The sound of his father's keys meant he should run to the room. It was as if a complex sound signal system had created to navigate a lie that had lasted years. One afternoon, when Margaret left for the beauty salon and Richard was in the office with the door closed, Isabella decided to take a more direct test. He sat next to Thomas on the living room rug and whispered in Tagalog, his native tongue, "I know you can hear me, anak." Thomas did not answer, but his fingers stopped moving the toy for a few seconds. Isabella continued in English, still whispering, "No need to be afraid. I'm here to help." It was then that something happened that would change everything. Thomas raised his eyes slowly and, for a brief moment, looked straight at Isabella. It was not the vague gaze that showed others. It was the direct and intelligent look of a child who had a lot to say, but had learned that silence was his only protection. At that moment, Isabella realized that she was facing something much larger than a poorly diagnosed medical condition. There, sitting on the carpet of millions of millions, was a boy who had found a way of surviving pretending to be a disability he did not have. The question that hammered in his mind was terrifying. What would an 8-year-old need to hide that it would be so serious as to choose to live in absolute silence? If you are wondering how a simple maid discovered in 3 weeks what expensive doctors could not detect in years, subscribe to the channel to discover the dark secrets that Thomas hid behind this forced silence, and why the truth that Isabella was about to unravel would put their lives in deadly danger. In the following days, Isabella began connecting pieces of a sinister head. During the mornings, when Margaret was in the office making her important calls, Isabella watched how Thomas reacted to the sounds of the house. He knew exactly when Margaret climbed the stairs by the specific ranger of the 10th step. He knew when his father was coming from the distant sound of the automatic gate. Even more disturbing, I knew when I should pretend to be sleeping for the simple noise of steps approaching your room. "He is very well behavior for a child with disabilities," commented Dr. Harrison during one of the home visits. "Usually deaf children are more agitated, disoriented." Margaret smiled falsely. "We have been very strict with discipline. Richard always says structure is essential, regardless of limitations." Isabella, silently cleaning in the corners of the room, realized how Thomas cringed imperceptibly when Margaret mentioned rigorous discipline. It was such a subtle movement that only someone watching carefully could notice. That afternoon, Richard Whitmore came home earlier than usual. Isabella was in the garden when she heard shouts from the office. He could not distinguish the words, but the tone was unmistakable. Pure anger directed at someone much smaller. "You can't remain a burden," Richard's voice echoed through the mansion. 8 years, Thomas. 8 years of shame." Isabella ran inside and saw Thomas staggering the office, with a red mark on her cheek. The boy passed her with his eyes low, driving himself automatically to his room. But for a few seconds Isabella vowed to have seen tears down his face. Truly deaf children do not cry by words they cannot hear. At night, when the house was silent and Isabella finished keeping the dishes, she decided to visit Thomas's room. The door was ajar, and she could see him sitting on the bed, holding that same broken toy. Isabella whispered so low that it would be impossible for someone really deaf to detect. "If you can hear me, balance your head only once." Thomas stopped moving the toy. His shoulders tensed. Then, slow and almost imperceptibly, he shook his head. Isabella felt a cold in her spine. He entered the room and closed the door behind him. "How long have you pretend, Anak?" Thomas first raised his eyes, and Isabella saw in them a crystal-clear intelligence mixed with a deep and old fear. When he finally spoke, his voice was just a hoarse whisper. "Always. If they knew I can hear, if they knew the things I hear at night." "What things?" Isabella knelt in front of him. Thomas looked at the door, making sure he was closed. "Daddy's calls. Their fights when they think I'm sleeping. The men who come here late at night for meetings." He paused, his voice getting even lower. "I know why they need me to be deaf, Isabella. I know why I can't talk." Isabella felt her heart shoot. "Tell me." "Because I heard them planning how to get rid of me." The words came out like a whispered confession, but carried the weight of years of silent terror. Thomas continued, "Margaret is not my real stepmother. She and my father, they are waiting for me to be 10 years old to be able to hospitalize me. There are papers hidden in the office safe. I heard them talking about an institution where children with serious disabilities are for the rest of their lives." Isabella had to lean on the wall. "My God, but that's not all." Thomas looked straight at her, and Isabella saw something that terrified her. It was not just fear in his eyes. It was knowledge. Knowledge that no child should have. "They killed my real mother, Isabella, and I heard everything." The silence that followed was deafening. Isabella realized that she was not just in front of a child pretending to be a disability. She was facing an eyewitness of murder that she had learned that her only chance of survival was pretending that she could not hear the secrets that would kill her. Why would an 8-year-old child choose to pretend deafness or end up as his mother? And what had Thomas heard most during all these years of forced silence that would make Isabella realize that saving that boy means challenging people willing to kill to keep their secrets buried? Isabella couldn't sleep that night. Thomas's words echoed in his mind like an awake nightmare. The next morning, he decided that he needed concrete evidence before acting. He began discreetly to photograph documents left carelessly on tables, noted suspicious calls, and memorized names mentioned in the tense conversations that happened in the corners of the mansion. For the following days, Isabella developed a meticulous routine. Woke up an hour earlier to search dumpsters in search of discarded papers. He cleaned Richard's office with extra care, always attentive to telephone conversations he assumed to be deprived. Her experience in the Philippines, where she had worked as an assistant in a law firm before emigrating her, helped her identify important documents. That's when he found a folder hidden in Richard's office that everything connected. Among real estate contracts and investment papers, there was a change of death. Thomas's mother's name, Sarah Whitmore, was death by domestic accident, but on the banks there were handwritten notes. Life insurance, $2.5 million and solved problem, M.W., Margaret Whitmore. The initials beat perfectly. Even more disturbing was a second document, a partially completed hospitalization form, dated for the following month, when Thomas would turn 9. The institution's name made her feel nausea. Hawthorne Psychiatric Institute, for children with severe disabilities and aggressive behavior. "Isabella?" Thomas's hoarse voice made her jump in fright. The boy was at the office door, pale as a ghost. "They left, but come back." "What are you doing?" "Looking for the truth," Isabella whispered, quickly keeping the documents. "Thomas, tell me exactly what you heard the night your mother died." Thomas approached, his small hands shaking. "I was in my room, pretending to sleep. I heard them screaming downstairs. Margaret was drunk, shouting that Mom found out about the money she was stealing from the company. Dad tried to calm both, but then I heard Mom shouting and then a horrible noise as if someone had fallen from the stairs." Isabella knelt in front of him. "And then Margaret ran up and stayed on the phone all night. I heard her telling someone that he seemed like a perfect accident and who could now continue with the plan to hospitalize when I was 10 years old." Thomas wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "The next day they told me that Mom had fallen alone and that I should never talk about that night. Thomas paused, took a deep breath and continued. But there are more, Isabella. Things I heard later. Margaret was not just stealing from Daddy's company. She was selling information to competitors. And Vincent, the man she always connects, is not just someone who solves problems. I heard her calling him my dear once. The revelation hit Isabella as a punch in the stomach. Margaret was not just a killer for money. She was a woman who betrayed her husband as she planned to eliminate her stepson. There's a drawer locked in their room, Thomas whispered. Margaret always checks her before bed. The key is hidden inside a book on the shelf. Gone girl. I saw her taking it once. It was at this moment that Isabella realized that she was not alone in this fight. Dr. Martinez, the pediatrician who visited Thomas monthly, had begun to ask strange questions about the progress of the boy's auditory condition. During his last visit, he had confided to Isabella that something would not close in previous exams. You know, Isabella, he had said, noting Thomas playing in the garden, in my 30 years of career, I've never seen a child with completely deafness to react so subtly to sound stimuli. It's almost as if he were interpreting. Isabella decided to trust him. That afternoon, when Richard and Margaret went to a business meeting, she called Dr. Martinez and asked him to come to the mansion urgently. When the doctor arrived, he found Isabella and Thomas waiting in the room with a recording that would change everything. Thomas had secretly recorded one of Richard and Margaret's night conversations using an old recorder he had found in the attic. The voices were clear as crystal. The boy is getting suspicious. Yesterday he looked straight at me when I mentioned Sarah's name. If he really hears, relax, Margaret. Even if he hears, who will believe in an officially deaf child? And if he tries to speak, we can always speed up plans for hospitalization. And after his 18? After 18, Vincent takes care of the rest. An accident during a family visit. Very sad. Dr. Martinez heard the whole recording in silence, his face getting pale with each word. When the recording ended, he looked at Thomas with a mixture of admiration and horror. My God, he murmured, you are the bravest boy I've ever met. Then he turned to Isabella. But you both are in deadly danger. People who kill money will not hesitate to kill yourself again to protect themselves. It was then that Dr. Martinez revealed something that none of them expected. Isabella, I'm not just a pediatrician. Before I graduated in medicine, I worked as Invest Criminal Tiger for the FBI. I have police contacts that can help us, but we will need more evidence. Isabella showed the documents she had photographed, including the changed death certificate and handwritten notes of Margaret. Dr. Martinez examined everything carefully. This is gold, but we need something that connects them directly to the crime, something that proves premeditation. Thomas pulled Isabella's sleeve. I know where they keep more things. In the office safe. I heard the combination 1,000 times when they thought I was sleeping. 2508, the date of death of Mom. That night, while Richard and Margaret slept, Isabella, Thomas, and Dr. Martinez opened the safe. Inside, they found not only Sarah's original will, which left everything to Thomas, but also printed emails between Margaret and Vincent Drake, detailing the plan to eliminate the Sarah obstacle and assume control of the inheritance until Thomas turns 18. The most shocking of all, there were photos of the accident scene taken before the ambulance arrived, showing clear signs of struggle that were later omitted in the official report, and an envelope with $50,000 in cash, along with a note, final payment, VD. But it was in the secretary drawer of the room that they found the definitive test, love letters between Margaret and Vincent, planning not only Sarah's murder, but also Richard, as Thomas was hospitalized. The plan was simple. Vincent would marry Margaret, inherit everything, and no one would question the natural death of a depressed widower. Dr. Martinez photographed everything and began to send the evidence for his contact with the police. In 48 hours we will have arrest warrants, he assured. But until then you both need to disappear. Isabella looked at Thomas, who for the first time in years was not pretending to be deaf. He heard every word, understood each implication, and his eyes shone no longer afraid, but with something she had never seen before, hope. But as they organized their temporary escape, none of them noticed the dark figure watching from the second-floor window. Margaret had woken up and heard movement in the office. Now, with a cold smile on her lips, she took the phone and dialed a number she knew from memory. Vincent, we have a problem. 2 people know too much, and one of them is that damn Philippine. A pause. Yes, all the 2, and make it look like an accident, just like last time. How could Thomas, Isabella, and Dr. Martinez escape from professional killers when they didn't even know they were already being hunted? And what even darker secret Margaret was willing to kill to protect? Such a terrible secret that he would make Sarah's murder just seem the beginning of a much larger conspiracy. The next morning, Margaret went down to breakfast with a fake smile glued to her face. Isabella, dear, Richard and I decided that you deserve a vacation. How about visiting your family in the Philippines? We already bought the ticket. Isabella felt the blood freezing. It was an obvious trap. They wanted to get rid of it before they could act. Thank you, Mrs. Whitmore, but I can't travel now. Thomas needs me. Thomas will be fine. In fact, we had a conversation with him last night. He finally admitted that he can hear perfectly. Margaret paused, observing Isabella's reaction. Surprising, it's not. Years pretending to be deaf. What a smart child. Isabella's heart shot. If Margaret knew that Thomas could hear, he meant they found out about the recordings and evidence. But there was something strange in her tone. It was not a panic. It was confidence. In fact, Margaret continued, stirring calmly in the cafe, Thomas told us a fascinating story about a little gubble maid who was spreading lies about our family. What a pity she will have to leave today. It was then that Isabella noticed the trap. Two large men entered the kitchen, Vincent Drake and one she didn't recognize. Vincent smiled coldly as he adjusted the fists of his shirt. Mrs. Torres, isn't it? I heard you like to record. But Isabella had learned some things during her weeks at the mansion. He pulled his cell phone from his pocket and showed the screen to Margaret. Dr. Martinez, can you hear that? I have the Vive on. The doctor's voice echoed through the room. Isabella, the police are on their way. Keep them talking. Margaret lost his composure for the first time. Thomas taught me that sometimes pretending we don't know something is the best strategy, Isabella said calmly. Last night, when you thought he had told everything, in fact, he was following our plan. Vincent advanced toward Isabella but was interrupted by Thomas's crystal-clear voice from the stairs. I recorded everything, Vincent. Yesterday's conversation, the plans for today, even you admitting that it killed M.I. was a mother, with her own hands because she kept screaming. Thomas descended the stairs holding a digital recorder, the same one he had used before, but now with a new devastating recording. You said it was easy to push her from the stairs because she was drunk. He said it was fun to see her try to cling to the railing. Thomas's voice was firm, with no trace of the fear he had carried for years. Vincent was livid. Liar, boy, you were pretending to sleep. For 5 years, Thomas replied. 5 years listening to you planning my death, talking about how to inherit my money, laughing at how everyone believed I was deaf. Margaret tried one last card. Richard doesn't know any of this, he's innocent. It was then that Richard Whitmore descended the stairs, but not with the expression of surprise Margaret expected. He was smiling. Actually, Margaret, I know everything for a long time. Richard looked at his wife with contempt, including your case with Vincent and the plans to kill me after Thomas was hospitalized. Margaret's face squirmed with shock. Richard, I hired private detectives 6 months ago when I discovered discrepancies in the company's accounts. They showed me photos of you and Vincent together, counterfeit documents, even recordings of you planning my death. Richard approached his son. Thomas, I'm sorry for not acting before. I needed solid evidence to protect you completely. Thomas first hugged his father in years. I knew you would find out, Dad. That's why I kept pretending, to give you time to gather the tests. Margaret began to laugh hysterically. Do you think this will end with us? Vincent has connections that you don't even imagine. Powerful people who won't let this story leak. What powerful people would these be? Asked Dr. Martinez, entering the kitchen accompanied by 2 FBI agents. Was Judge Morrison who received $200,000 to file the investigation into Sarah's death? Or perhaps Prosecutor Sullivan, who was also on the payroll? Vincent's face turned gray. Like you, his Cayman bank account was not as secret as he thought, one of the agents answered. Not even transfers to other network members. You have been being investigated for 8 months as part of a higher operation. Dr. Martinez smiled. When Isabella came to me, I found that your case was connected to a federal investigation into judicial corruption. Thomas was not the only child victim of this network, at least 15 similar cases in different states. Margaret tried to run, but was blocked by another agent who entered the back door. His face was disfigured by despair. You don't understand, she shouted. It was just a business. Rich families with problems, inconvenient children. We offered solutions. Solutions how to murder mothers and in turn healthy children? Isabella asked with disgust. Vincent tried one last move. I can deliver bigger names. Senators, entrepreneurs. This operation goes beyond what you think. We already know the names, answered the agent. Your email account has been hacked 3 months ago. The whole network has been falling today, simultaneously in 7 states. The sound of sirens approached. Vincent tried to run, but Dr. Martinez and the agents blocked all exits. Vincent Drake and Margaret Whitmore, you are arrested for murder, conspiracy, attempted murder, fraud, and participation in criminal organization, announced the detective, placing the handcuffs. Margaret shouted while being taken, You destroyed years of work, years of planning, and you destroyed whole families, Thomas replied, his firm and clear voice. But we reconstruct ours. While the criminals were taken, Thomas turned to Isabella. Thanks for believing in me when I couldn't even talk. Isabella knelt and hugged the boy. Thank you for teaching me that sometimes silence is the bravest way to scream. Richard put his hand on Isabella's shoulder. You saved my son and our family. How can I thank you? Let me keep taking care of him, Isabella replied. He still has a lot to learn how to use his voice. Thomas smiled, a genuine smile that Isabella had never seen before. Actually, Isabella, I think I'm finally ready to make a lot of noise. Dr. Martinez approached a dossier in his hands. Thomas, your courage to keep this scam for so long helped dismantle a network that operated for over a decade. You have saved other children who don't even know they exist. Other children? Thomas asked. In Phoenix, a 7-year-old girl pretending to be autistic to escape abusive parents who planned her death. In Chicago, a boy pretending cerebral palsy to avoid being eliminated by an inheritance. All connected to the same criminal network that you helped overthrow. But a question still hung in the air as they watched the police car away. How many other families around the country still hid similar secrets? And how many children were still pretending deficiencies to survive conspiracies that turned homes into battlefields where life itself had become the prize of a silent war for power and money?